Well, welcome back to the Conversation podcast, and just once again, a big welcome to our online viewers on YouTube, as well as those listening in on whatever podcast platform you are using. We are currently in our Your Story series, and we are interviewing people within our church and just friends and people who we have in our different spheres of influence and arena. Today you may not recognize my guest, and his name is David Ayerst. He's my best mate. He is a long-standing friend. He was my best man at our wedding. He was our MC at our wedding as well. And yeah, it's been so good to just journey with him. And although you may not know him, I know that you are going to be really blessed by his story and his wisdom. I hold him in high regard. He has a very genuine, real walk with the Lord, and that I appreciate. And so, as we just track through his story, and just a little disclaimer up front, today maybe a little bit more about his story in his career and his business journey as well. But there'll also be elements of how God has moved through him in his family life and so on. So, looking forward to it. Dave, welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is really quite a treat.
Yeah. How are you enjoying Cape Town so far?
Yeah, we're loving it. It's fantastic weather, great scenery and surrounds, and obviously great friends to be spending our time with. So we really look forward to this, our whole family, every year. So fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah. Dave and his family come down once a year to hang out with us, and we love it. And so, Dave, maybe just off the bat, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your family. Fill us in on the blanks there.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm Dave. I'm married with two beautiful daughters. My wife is Bern, short for Bernadine, and I have two daughters, Holly Ray and Rebecca. I'm from Port Elizabeth. Originally, I had a stint in Joberg for a while, probably about 4 years, and then moved back to Port Elizabeth, where we now live and work and do everything else. I go to church at Ayerst Family Church, which is pretty much where I met you. So loving that in PE. Obviously, with all the lockdown differences, and that's been quite crazy. But that's me in a very small nutshell. Yeah.
Okay.
I work in IT. That's one more thing I can say.
Everyone says, "Oh, what does that mean? Like, what do you actually do in IT?"
I do like anything related to IT at our company. So that's what it means for me.
So you work for the National Wool Testing Bureau, is that right?
Yeah. So they're called the Wool Testing Bureau of South Africa.
Yes.
We test all the wool that comes, that's basically grown and sold in Africa. So we're the only testing house in Africa. And so we're very busy. And this year has been no difference, because there was 1 month where we couldn't do our testing and there were no wool sales in the hard lockdown. So we've had pretty much a hectic run to the end of the year, but it's fantastic, and God's been very good and faithful to the industry, I think, because there's been a lot of wool.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that later. What I'm keen to do is just track through your life a little bit, pick up on moments that may have been great moments or challenging moments, and to zoom in on how God was intricately involved in those moments.
Sure.
So maybe just to start us off, tell us a bit about your background, how you came to faith. I mean, were you involved in a Christian family? When did that decision make sense for you, and so on? Yeah,
so I was born into a family of very believing parents who were not Christians when they got married initially, but they got saved, I think, about 7 years into their marriage. And so my younger brother and I, we were born a little bit later. There's 4 of us. So I have an older sister and older brother. And my parents have always been quite involved in church, involved in ministry. My dad was a lay preacher. He passed away in 2009, but he was a lay preacher, so he did a lot of teaching and preaching. And my mother also She also teaches and preaches, in fact, still. And they raised us really to love God and have a relationship with God, have Him in our lives. And so that's how we were raised as a family. And so it's central to my upbringing, central to who I am and our family. God plays a big role in our family. We pray with our girls every night before bed. We answer the hard theological questions of a 7-year-old. And so it's a journey as a parent now to see what my parents poured into us. We now have to try and pour into our children. And so that's kind of where my relationship with God began, was just in the family. And so it was always part of conversation. You around the supper table, or if my mom was teaching me how to drive, or we were going on a drive somewhere to shop or something like that, God was just always part of the conversation.
And having known both your parents, I know what strong spiritual stalwarts they have been in many ways. You'd mentioned that your dad sadly passed away, and I was part of that journey. I think if there's one thing that a lot of listeners and viewers can relate to this year, it's pain, loss for some, hardships, challenges. I know you've had your fair share, and without getting Deborah, I think it's helpful for us to, just chew on these. Speak to us a little bit about how you processed that. Was it a challenge in terms of your relationship with God, how you saw Him as Father? Was there anger involved? Tell us a bit about that whole time in your life.
If I think back on that time, which I often do, because it's, as you said, you have these watershed moments in life, and that's definitely one of them, because it was probably one of the first seriously major tough things I've had to deal with. If you lose a grandparent, it's almost natural, and I did lose some grandparents, over the time. But when you lose your father or your mother, I think it's such a close relationship, because essentially your parents are the first two people you ever really know, And so, and my dad was very gregarious, very friendly. He used to always call me every day, find out how my day had been, even when I worked in the same office with him, and maybe give me a call in the evening just to see how things were going. And so to have that friendship gone was quite hectic, and I lost it pretty much as soon as he got ill, because he had motor neuron disease, and what happens there is you slowly lose the use of all of your motor muscles, because the nerves no longer carry the signal. And but basically it was a very hard time for him, which we understood, and so you start losing the relationship before he's even actually passed away. Definitely parts of it, because you're grieving and you're watching this person slowly just get weaker and weaker. And I think that if I remember that time, how I felt towards God in that, I remember saying to a mutual friend of ours, Andrew Hartsleaf, that I said, at times it feels like I'm just hanging on by my fingernails to my faith. And it's just because it's such an emotional thing, and then you realize that your emotions are important to God, and that He can let you feel that way. But I also realized that if I don't have God to turn to, where do I go? We had the whole church praying for his healing. My dad himself had a healing ministry, in his time on earth. And to see someone who had prayed for and seen miraculous healings, just slowly deteriorate and not be healed, was difficult. And I remember saying once or twice to God, I said, Lord, all I'm going to pray for is that your will be done, because I don't actually know what else I can pray into the situation. I was working with my dad at the time, so we would often go and visit him. I would go and visit him from the office. We had I worked for a guy who was also friends with my dad, very fond of him, and so he allowed me the space to go if I needed to go. So I pretty much went daily in the morning to go visit him, And it was very, very difficult to stand there for those, waiting our times, or visiting our times, should I say. And you can ask God a million questions on your way there and on your way back. But it's interesting how even in the midst of that, God can give you some encouragement and some comfort. An artist we both love is John Mark McMillan.
Yeah.
And on his first album, which you actually showed to me, there's a song called London Town. And in the song London Town, there's a verse that goes, there is a lion, he's coming into London Town, he's walking on the promenade, he's standing in the underground, he's not afraid of the rain, the pain, things are going to change, I can feel it in my veins. And I remember driving up to the hospital one day, singing that song, because it was on my radio in my car. And yes, I was just like, great words, and I was singing it, I was just enjoying the music, and I was singing those words over and over again. And then I walked up to ICU and I saw my dad, and it was always tough to communicate with him because his vocal cords were shut off from the intubation. But he said to me, hey, I saw a lion walking in here, and and I was like, what? I've just been singing about this lion that's standing in ordinary everyday places, walking around. Not afraid of the rain, troubles and hard times, not afraid of the pain.
Yeah.
And I just said to my dad, I said, yes, Dad, I think you've seen God here today,
Yeah.
And that was just like one takeaway memory that I have from that. So, yes, it was very tough. There were times when I was hanging on by my fingernails. And I think often, your relationship with God is lived out in times of peace, until something like this happens.
Yeah.
And then it's the first real thing that you go through. And because it's so uncomfortable and painful, you don't really realize that that's normal part of your faith walk.
Yeah.
You do feel like you're hanging on by your fingernails. And I was. But yes, I've seen God's faithfulness through that and after that as well. So, and then, my dad did eventually walk around, with the lion, he's walking there
Still
right now.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah. I think it's those moments, those crises of faith that shake us. And for some, it's so sad how it can even mean the turning away from faith. Yeah. But if we can weather those storms and find God in the wilderness, we'll find him so much easier in times of provision and blessing, And so you've been through this very traumatic and emotionally draining and just a really hard time in your life. You've come through it. I think you had a great support alongside you with Bern as well. Yeah. And very soon after that, there's this understanding or this realization that, hey, I think it's time for a career shift. Yeah. Speak to us a bit about that.
Yeah, that actually happened at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very strange... as soon as my dad got ill, I kind of felt like I needed to finally pursue my studies into IT and computers. I'd always wanted to do it, but at the time I'd matriculated, it was a Y2K problem, so the demand for computer-related work was kind of isolated to that. It seemed, anyway, and I went on another tangent, studied something else I didn't like, dropped out, yada, yada, and kind of ended up in sales, where I was working with my dad at the time. And always found myself fixing things computer related at work. So when my dad got ill, it was like something changed completely. Like all of a sudden I had the freedom to make the choice. I can't explain it more than that. I just felt like I had the freedom to choose and I needed to. And I remember lying, I was just lying on the bed one night and Bern walked into the room and I said to her, yes, I think I must go back and study. And my wife, ever being supportive, just said, okay, let's do it. So, and that meant full-time study. So that meant not working, full-time studies for 3 years. And yes, so blessed. I mean, I've got so many stories that we don't have the time today to tell you all of them. But I got bursaries I shouldn't have got. I got...
you won a writing award or something like that
Yeah,
as
I won an
well.
award in my second year for economics, which basically paid for my car, which died the same day I got the award.
Yeah.
A deposit for my next car. The same day that my car died, I got that award. And just so many instances of God's provision throughout that, where I look back and I go, there is no doubt in my mind, at all, that He, at least let's put it this way, that He blessed that choice and that decision. And in many ways, I think sometimes when you're feeling something like that, where God's saying, He's actually saying something to you. I've found, can I share something recently with you? Very recently, we were at a breakfast, corporate breakfast, where one of the prizes was a laptop. Now I knew there'd be prizes given away at the breakfast, and it's funny. I mean, I got there late because I struggled to leave the office. It was kind of like should I go? Shouldn't I go? Because it was COVID times and everything. And when I sat down and they started showing the prizes, they showed the laptop as being the grand prize that would be there, and it was funny. I sat there going like, I really would like that laptop. Like I'm saying, I'd really like that laptop because my wife needed a computer. She'd been praying for one, trusting for one, and, on the lookout for one even, for us to try and buy.
Yeah.
And yes, it's so strange. I can't explain it other than this, that I sat there thinking, I'd like that. And at the same time, I had this quiet confidence that it was mine. I can't even explain it better than that. And then when you're sitting there and they're calling out the names and all the other prizes are going and it's not you.
Yeah.
And then they finally chose the prize. Spoiler alert, I did win the laptop. But the guy who was picking the numbers out, he literally picked 3 cards before he picked mine. So I was the 4th one to be picked. So it's just amazing. And I mean, there's been many, many instances that I could tell you about where there's been that kind of provision or that kind of just like miraculous intervention where you're going, this is not coincidental. This is God speaking,
totally
and moving.
Yeah. And the more you see it, the more you see the pattern, and the more the easier it is to acknowledge God in that blessing. I think in this journey of faith, and I've spoken about it recently in a message at church and so on, but I'm finding how God gives you the what, but not the how. And so more than not, I'm more confident in knowing what the what is. I really believe that I've heard God, or at least sensing God on something. But the faith journey is the how.
That's it.
And the why is because we are God's sons and daughters, and He wants to bless us, and all the glory goes to Him. But it's the how that we want, and it's the how that God doesn't want to give, because then, why would we trust Him?
Yeah.
And I think that's been a journey for you, where you've taken leaps of faith, even though you probably wouldn't kind of place yourself as a high risk personality.
Definitely not. Yeah,
but
I'm very risk averse.
Yeah. So moving forward, you study. God presents an opportunity for a job that's not in Port Elizabeth, your hometown, where you've been studying.
Yeah.
So it's a decision to move up to Joberg, a place that is not necessarily that fond in your mind or your wife's mind, who had spent a couple of years there before. Speak to us briefly about that season.
Yeah, Joberg was obviously a springboard into where I find myself right now. I regard those four years in Joberg as being essential to the journey. And while they were not in many ways pleasant years, you look back at it and you go, yes, God built my faith. He brought me around. He, took me through some dark times that really made it possible to grow my character. And you and I often speak about the character building journey, because it's character doesn't get built in good times.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if I'd known it back then, before moving to Joberg, I would have really been a bit flummoxed to say, maybe I don't want to go to Joberg. I don't want to go through the drill school, as it were. But God took us there, and just so many times and ways that he provided and made a way that are just mind-blowing. And we had a burglary in 2016 in March, which kind of really ripped me to pieces. Not physically, I wasn't even there. My wife was there with both my children, and the gardener and 4 armed gunmen ran in the house, basically parked a car under the garage as it was closing, stepped inside, tried to make as though they were looking for someone, told my wife, look, don't be stupid, showed a gun. And then they told her straight up, we are looking for jewelry and money, which we had neither. So, my wife doesn't have much jewelry. She's got her wedding ring, engagement ring and wedding ring. That was it. We don't ever keep cash at home. We hardly ever draw cash. So we just had nothing. And the guy saw the wedding ring, and my wife just gave it to him and said, look, there it is. And he actually said, I'm going to have to take this. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to take this. And then he also said
Stockholm syndrome, whatever it is.
And then he actually said to her as well, he said, don't worry, I see you've got children, we're not going to hurt you. We just want money and jewelry. And so that happened, and they left. And then I found I really battled as a man after that, as a father and a husband. Just like wondering, or realizing that I was not in control. That whole situation happened, and I didn't even know that I had to trust God in the situation, because it all happened, and I only got the phone call afterwards. So really tough. I battled with insomnia after that. Chronic heartburn, I couldn't lie down at night. I had to sit up. So I had some physiological challenges after
psychosomatic.
that. Psychosomatic issues. And God in his mercy, I think I had a couple months prior met someone had mentioned to me in passing in Joberg is a trauma counselor. And she works for the police, and she deals with all these situations. And so I was lucky to have that contact. Well, not lucky, I was blessed, to have that contact that we'd met prior. The provision was there before I even knew what we were going to go through. And she really helped me. I decided I had to go and see someone. And pretty much after the first session, I could sleep at night. So it's just amazing to have someone to unpack the stuff with you, tell you it's normal what you're going through. So
I mean, also
that was the hardest
even
part,
that post-stress disorder, even though you weren't in the situation, I think a man and a father's role of protector, and then knowing that you weren't there,
exactly.
I can only imagine
that's exactly what runs through your mind,
and again and again and again and again, and what if and what
could
and
I have
why
done differently?
God, and
how could I have protected my family, made sure this didn't happen? Did I choose the right place to live? Just so many questions.
And God's grace sustained and protected, and I think in a different way, that was maybe the kind of real, what's the word, that springboard that said, oh, okay, we've got to start considering a route back to Port Elizabeth. There definitely was this realization that this is not the place where we want to really sink our roots for forever. Which was the desire, but this almost fast forwarded that. And then once again, there really wasn't a lot of opportunity in your industry in PE. I mean, I just recall you saying, but the jobs are up here. There's no,
Yeah, definitely.
And yet God opened the door. And how did that work out?
It's amazing. I almost had a half-hearted attempt at trying to get back to PE because, as I said to you, I'm very risk-averse. I had a job in Joberg, and realizing that the job market in Port Elizabeth is not the same. It's predominantly automotive. So, if there was anything kind of automotive, that would have been what's there. And I had a few meetings with guys, just over the phone, like a few interviews and that. But they were not at the kind of salary level that I required as for my family to support them. And then I kind of decided on like what I'd need salary wise, and then I just sent. I was actually down visiting Lighthouse because we'd always visit Port Elizabeth every holiday chance we got.
No brainer.
Yeah, so I was down there and I was chatting to a friend at church, and he said, "Oh, you know what? My neighbor is high up at BCX Business Connection, which is a IT company." And he said, just send me your CV. I'll give it to him. So I did. That's all I did. I sent my CV to this guy, and he gave it to his neighbor, who gave it to a professor at the university, who gave it to someone who called me and said, we're looking for a developer who's had some experience. Would you consider coming to PE? And I said, yeah. I said, this is my figure. And he said, great. That's what we were thinking. So, and that was it. They brought me down to PE, and I'm so grateful that they gave me that opportunity and made it possible, So, yeah.
So end of
incredible.
2016.
End of 2016. Yeah. November I started. Yeah.
The funny thing for our listeners is Dave and his family purchased a house in the same complex 3 doors down from us where we were staying, and it was about a week before, I think, or 2 weeks before Dave had said yes to the job offer, that Ems and I had said yes to come and minister down here in Cape Town with me on the team.
Yeah.
And
totally killed my vibe.
That was the hardest part about leaving.
Timing.
Yeah, but hey, it makes for great annual holidays.
Yeah, it does.
So I think the last couple of years have been seasons of blessing, just really getting reabsorbed back into the Lighthouse ministry. And I know Bern has loved the worship ministry. Your two girls are happy and within school systems now and so on.
Yeah.
So I think maybe just to segue a little bit more into a couple of things about just your spirituality and God here. It's been a story with pain. It's been a story with hope, where God has been glorified. But maybe just four questions to you, Dave, in your walk with the Lord, and we have our ups and downs. Who is God to you?
Yeah. So, again, that friend that we have, our mutual friend, Andrew Hartsleaf, he's been a mentor to both of us, and still continues to be. I'm still in contact with him, but he always. He's asked me that question many times, almost as a test, giving me the theory. And I like his answer. And I'm mentioning his name because I'm not saying I didn't come up with this, but it's something that I can really get behind. And which is, he said, whenever you think of Jesus, then you say, who is Jesus to me? And your answer would then be, Jesus is the lover of my soul. And so then you say, well, who am I then? And you say, well, I'm the beloved. And that's where I'm at, in terms of who God is to me, who Jesus is to me. He is a person that chose me, and there's a relationship there to be had. And to quote another one of his, which is Selwyn News, he says, for love to be loved, there has to be an object. And we are that object. And I think that for me, that's it. It's a relationship with the God of the universe.
Have you found it hard to be loved and to receive his love?
Yeah, definitely. I have looked at his love through the lens of performance and good behavior. And at times when you find yourself in bad behavior or something similar, you might think, he doesn't love me as much, or how could he love this, or I'm not lovable because, whatever. And so, there has been that challenge. But I must say, as time has gone by, I've been more able to accept that love and to know that it's always there. Despite the circumstances, and also despite the discipline you might be going through, that He still loves you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you found it easy to hear God's voice? Has that been a process for you?
Yes, it has been, because I think many times you want to hear a very audible, you almost want God to be like Google for you. Hey God, what should I do? Well, you could take this route or you could take that route.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, oftentimes we do. We want to treat God like that, and it isn't like that. And we often talk about this, the still small voice, that He doesn't come at you with massive signs in the sky, and He can do that. But generally speaking, on a day-to-day basis, he's not moving like that. It's a still small voice. And even in the Bible with Elijah, when he does that, he sends an earthquake, a firestorm, and a wind, and it says in the Bible there that God wasn't in any of those things. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, a small whisper, a voice out of the wilderness, and then he's like, okay, wow, that's like a still small voice. That's where God is. That's where He's operating, talking to you. So hearing His voice, like I explained with that laptop story, I'm finding more and more that that's actually how He speaks. And I wanted to actually bring back to what you said, God gives you the what, He doesn't give you the how. I think sometimes, that's how I hear Him speaking very, very, very clearly. Is that He says like, I've got a great story that has to do with your a house actually, where you left from the complex that we live in. We had another friend help us with a lot of gardening in our unit, and I remember walking in my garden thinking, I'd love to do something for this guy. I'd love to get him something he'd enjoy, and knowing that he was a cricket fan, I thought, yes, it would be awesome to get season tickets to St. George's. And I thought, okay, I don't have any money at the moment. How am I going to buy these tickets? I don't have the money. But I thought I'll go and look, see how much they cost. As it turned out, you couldn't buy the season tickets. It was not something you could buy. So at that point, they hadn't had it, and there wasn't a means that I could see to buy them. So I just thought, okay, well, that's the end of that idea,
Yeah.
And anyway, the lady who bought your house, she was doing some walk, and she had won a lucky draw. And as I was walking past the unit one day, she said to me, listen here, do you like cricket? And I was like, and this was about 2 weeks after that initial thought. And I said, yeah, I love cricket. And she said, I've won season tickets at a lucky draw, but I don't like cricket. Do you want them? And I just couldn't, in that moment, I just realized that thought was God speaking. And He was giving the what. And He was going to show me the how. Yeah. And I was not involved in it.
Yeah.
So.
And we think, well, I haven't got the money, so I can't. And we think,
yeah, exactly.
How boring would it always be? I've got the money, okay, done.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's something that I've seen in your heart, and just God do in your life is really bring out this generosity and this suppleness in you. I'm not saying that you were hard once upon a time, but there's this softness towards people. I remember, I think it was last year when you were here and we were at Checkers, and just the way that you interact with checkout tellers at the shopping centres, at Checkers or Pick and Pay, wherever, where most people don't even make eye contact. They're just looking at the card machine. Been in this queue for too long, whatever it is. And I mean, what I notice is you've always made an effort to love and to acknowledge and to ask them their name. And there's this genuine sense of love for people. Would you say that's come from a walk with God? Has that always just been innate within you, or has that been something that you've really grown in?
Yeah, I think it is slightly innate within me. But it's definitely become more and more as my walk with God has progressed. And it's because that is how Jesus was with people. Yeah. And when I read the Bible to my kids, you read about how he is with, he's always with the sickly and the outcasts of society, and like the people who don't have any importance to, social strata or something like that, let's say. So I think that Andrew Pierce, another friend of ours, he always used to quote something from, I think it was, I don't know who it was some Greek philosopher, but where he says, be kind because everyone's, fighting a war of their own, but, that's Jesus. He said in this commandment, which is to love your neighbor as you love yourself, and, and so I think I'm very challenged by that. I have to be. I can't walk around not caring about people when that's what Jesus said we must do. And so I genuinely do care about people, and I am a people person, so I am drawn to people maybe more so than someone who's more introverted. But I do genuinely want to just connect with the person. So if you ask them their name, I've learned a little bit of East Xhosa to help me in the Eastern Cape because it's a very prevalent language there. And making that effort, I think, can also convey to people that they matter. And Mandela said that. He said, if you speak to a person in a language that they understand, you talk to their head. But if you speak to a person in their language, you speak to their heart. And I think that's something that also impacted me, and I try to do that as far as possible. It doesn't always go well. I tell you, this is this Christian challenge. Sometimes you might be sitting at a robot like I was, and you see a guy on the side of the road, destitute, wanting food, and I had a can of Pringles, and I thought, let me give this guy the Pringles, So I said, here we go, sir, here's some chips, and he just looked at me and he said, yeah, and he stuffed the chips down his gullet, in 3 seconds, everything gone. And he then threw the tin on the road. He littered, and that whole scenario was one where I sat there going, how do I respond to this now? Because is the joy in the giving, or is the joy in the response I get from the person I'm giving to? And in that moment, I know I heard the Holy Spirit say to me, you see, that is doing what's right. How he responded is not why I do it. It's not why you must do it. Let me put it that way. And so even at Cape Town now, visiting again, some people I talk to, they ignore me flat. That's life.
Yes.
But we're not doing it for the kickback,
for the accolade.
You've got to love them as you love as Jesus loves you. Essentially,
obedience to the prompting that is there initially.
I'm far from perfect in that, but it's what drives me at least. In that regard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dave, I think this could open up a whole lot more conversation for us. Maybe we should do an annual podcast here. But just in closing, what would your advice be to those listening if there's one thing that you have learned throughout your life, or God has really hammered home, the one thing that you just keep on, this is who I am, this is the message that I want to give. What would that one thing be to our listeners and viewers today?
Yeah, I would say that Jesus is alive. God is a living being, and He made us in His image. So relationship is who He is. Right back in Genesis 1:1, where He says, "Let us make man in our image." And so even there, way back in the beginning, there is an indication of relationship. And I think that, then when God made man, the first thing the first emotion that's recorded in the Bible is loneliness. And that, God says it's not good for man to be alone, and he makes Eve, And I think that our relationships are extremely important. The relationships you have with your family, with your wife, with your children, those are prime relationships. And those should never be put on the back burner for anything. Those should be the prime relationships in our life after God. So I think having that order of things right, loving your family, but loving God and getting to know Him as a person. That for me is the whole thing, to say when something goes wrong, it's not this draconian like robot or alien kind of vindictive judging guy. Yes, he can judge, and he does, and he will, because it's part of his being. But through all of that, if you ever look at how he expressed himself through Jesus, he wants a relationship with us. So pursue the relationship, not the religion, but pursue the relationship with Jesus. That would be my takeaway.
That's so good. Maybe just a final follow-up question. For those listening who are a bit younger, or who are maybe at the onset of their career decision, maybe those who have matriculated, so on. You've walked through a fair amount. Sure, there's a lot to come. What would you tell them when it comes to the anxieties or the worries about, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to, what would your thinking there? Just an off-the-cuff question.
Sure. Yeah,
that's just one bit of advice.
Yeah, one bit of advice. In this world, I would say that there's probably something that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be something like feeding the poor, or, I have always loved computers.
Yeah.
I've always loved technology. And I look back and I say, geez, I needed to go through what I went through. But the truth is, I always loved computers. And so in the end, that's where I wanted to go back to, So you look at something like that and you make the choice to say, where are my giftings? What energizes me in terms of, giftings God's given me to work with, and pursue it that way, for some people, because many people might be thinking in terms of money, and money really isn't everything. And the world needs all kinds of people. So don't forget that you're going to be playing a part in the greater scheme of things happening in the world as well. Yeah. The world needs great teachers. The world needs doctors who care. The world needs scientists who are thorough. The world needs accountants who are ethical and have morals.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been really cool.
It's one of those conversations where you just have to put a full stop at some point.
We have to.
We'll carry on talking the whole day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate your time.
Yeah. No, thanks so much, Tristan.
Well, thanks for joining us once again on our Your Story series. It's been a real, genuine, heart-to-heart conversation. One that really draws me into a place of self-searching and just going back and saying, God, what is it that you're wanting to teach me in this season about your nature and through the trials and the pain. And it's been a good one.
Yeah.
Maybe just for those listening in and our viewers, just to say that the next podcast will be in 2021. So this is our final podcast for this year. So do stay tuned. It'll be out in the second or third week, probably more toward the third week of January. And this series is one that we only started about a month ago. And we're really wanting to just continue it because there are so many stories to share and we gain from stories. And so the Your Story series will be going on in the Conversation podcast. And do stay tuned. Please share this with friends, with people around you. Even if you just hit that little 3 dots and then on your phone or whatever, and just hit share and just send it to one person who you think could be blessed by this podcast. Because we really want people to know and to hear what it is that God's doing. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next year. But that's it for now. God bless.
Cool.